Okay, we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat. Sorry for the delay, folks. And today we have author J.M. Lively, who's here to talk about his book, The Last Soul.
hmm
And I will turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Lively, pen name J.M. Lively, and author of, just like she stated here, I'm the author of The Last Soul. It's my first book that I've released to this point, working on the sequel and the sequel to that as well, along with another side story. So, got the first one done and decided that uh, I would work on my stories in bulk now. I took everything I had in me to get the first one done, but now that I've kind of got it going, the ball's moving, I'm able to write more, and I've got a lot more stories sit on the pipeline. So they're hopefully, once I release the next book, there won't be such a long wait between volumes, but that's the idea anyways. Took about a year off after I released the first book. We were building a house, and we're in now. What you see behind me is our house, and looking out our nice porch there. But we are done with that. We're finally at 100%. We're clear with all of our stuff. Got to sign a few more pieces of paper, and now I can get back to focusing on what I want to do, and that's writing. And here we are. So how's it going, everyone?
Okay, so congratulations on the new house.
Thanks.
And so tell everybody about the book. Give us an overview.
Sure. So my book, The Last Soul, it follows the main character. His name is Lathan, and that was inspired by a friend of ours. She had a little boy that she adopted, and they named him Lathan. And I thought it was unique, but also kind of original. You know, it's a play on a traditional name that you also don't hear very often. So I liked it, so we used that. Anyway, he is a taiko drum coach. He is a coach at the University of Davis in California. When I was in elementary school, I went to a taiko drum show, and it like changed my life. For whatever reason, I loved that show. It has always stuck with me. I've always remembered how it went and how exciting and exhilarating it was. And it struck me when I was writing that I should have a character who was a drummer like that. So I made him a coach of a team, and he shows up one day. They've got a performance coming up, and his students are out there practicing. And if you don't know anything about taiko drumming, you have to be very physically fit. It is not, you can't just be a slouch at all. You have to be very physically fit. It's very demanding. So they're out there practicing, running around, doing their stuff they need to be doing. And he sees that one of his students there at the college isn't there. So he asks, like, what's going on? Find out that some supernatural stuff sort of happened, and everyone's a little freaked out about it. And this kid, particularly, he's got no family in the area. He's like an out of state college student. And so he's really got no one who's looking out for him. So the coach goes to look for him, gets involved in this stuff himself. And in the process, he ends up dying. He ends up getting killed. And that's sort of where my story takes off, because my story explores the afterlife. And so now we get to follow Lathan as he travels to my world, Orenia, which is basically heaven in this universe, and what happens there, why he went there. On his journey, he passes through limbo, which we find out is basically a moon to heaven. It's like an orbiting satellite, and it's in the style of like an island floating in the middle of space. And it's sort of where souls go to be sorted. My whole universe runs on a cycle of reincarnation. So you end up on limbo first before you go anywhere. And if your soul is ready to, basically ascend and go up another level, you would go into other worlds that were higher in the third dimension. I don't want to get too specific on how I've written it all out, but basically there's levels of the third dimension, the highest being Arenia, my heaven, and then everything below. As you die and you enter this cycle, basically if you lived according to your soul's purpose, you move up in the ladder and in your last life. And if you didn't, if you did things not according to what your soul needs or should be doing, you actually go down. And so you just kind of keep continuing this cycle until you eventually make it. When you get to Arenia, that is when you've basically made it. You are not in the cycle anymore. You have reached the pinnacle of the third dimension, and that's basically where your soul resides now. And that's where he ends up, and it's about what happens there. His body physically merges with his soul, and that makes him develop latent powers and abilities. And everyone on Iridia has them. Some are stronger, some are more specific, some are more broad. the whole spectrum of abilities. And he sort of finds out that heaven is not what he thought. He was expecting, what you always hear, at least in America and Christian based faith, because that's kind of where he was raised in that. You get to heaven, you've got this everything shiny, and there's no sinners, and there's angels, and you get to speak with God and all this stuff. And he shows up, and it's basically just another world, except instead of everyone being all happy-go-lucky and whatever else, there's people who are committing atrocious crimes. There are those who are doing good for the world, and there's those who are doing awful. Basically, the way he describes it in one of the scenes where he sees how chaotic it can get is he's like, it's as if someone decided to just take Earth, dump superpowers on everyone, and just let it sort itself out. And that's basically what Arenia has become. It didn't always used to be that way, but that's what it's become. And so he now starts on a journey being connected with other people who are like him and like-minded like him to fix those problems. And he's also trying to make his way back to Earth because he was killed by a monster that he finds out is from Arenia, someone who was able to cross the barriers and go to another world, and they are now wreaking havoc on Earth. So he wants to get back and protect or save his family from this monster as well.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the main character. What's his personality like? His traits, his flaws?
Sure. He was a little bit based on me because, of course, it's easiest to emulate yourself, especially when you're getting started. Not everything is the same. I definitely took other qualities from other inspirations, but one of the things that I am is I'm a lot more of like a pantser when it comes to writing, and I'm a lot more of a pantser when it comes to life too. I'm very much of just a go with the flow type of person, and that can be detrimental when it comes to planning because sometimes I don't plan things out or I don't plan them well enough. And that's basically him on the first paragraph of his story is waking up late to an alarm, running late for a doctor's appointment with his daughter, and sometimes that's me. And so that's him. He's a little unorganized. He's a little you know, running with his emotions on his sleeves, but also feeling this fierce need to protect those that are important to him. He cares a lot about his family. I also made him as an adopted person too. So he grew up as an adoptee, and he was adopted young, so he doesn't remember much about his family, and that will come into play later. And then it's also going to come into play about how he sort of relates to other people and why his family is so important to him because he's kind of a loner. He's kind of a lone wolf, and he doesn't always connect with everyone else the best. But his wife and his now daughter in the story, he loves them fiercely, and he wouldn't let anything happen to him. So it's also about getting separated from them right when he's starting to build real connections in his life, right when he finally has a family and he's in love and they just had their child. He dies and he wants to get back to that. So that's also part of him too. And I guess just to clarify on that too, like I said, he's based on me, but I wasn't adopted. I have adopted siblings, and I know I'm friends with other people who have gone through that process as well. But it seemed to fit for the character for him. So like I said, loosely based on me, but also a lot of things that are different too.
Okay, so what were your reasons for writing the book and your inspirations?
So the main reason I wrote when I was about a year before I wrote the book, I was running a business as a professional resume writer, and I kind of fell in love with writing then. I took a year. I wasn't working another job or anything. We were good enough financially that I could give it a go. And my wife was doing her regular job. She's a nurse. And then I was at home and I was trying to make it happen as a resume writer. And I really enjoyed the writing aspect. And as I struggled with the marketing and the sales aspect of that particular career, I also struggle with that and writing books, but everything's a learning curve. And that I did it for a while. I made some money. Some months were great, some months were not. Just how it goes. And when we found out that we were pregnant, we were trying to have a child. I just decided as like I can't do this anymore. I'm not making enough money for what I need to be to support a family. You know, my wife was doing great for just the two of us, but I needed more, and I didn't want to be, that guy who wasn't holding up his end, wasn't supporting his family in that way. So I went back to working, no big deal. I thought I would be able to do the resume writing stuff kind of part-time. We didn't do daycare, so my wife and I worked alternating shifts, and we took care of the child alternatively as well. And I thought I'd be able to write during downtime. Little did I know that fatherhood doesn't allow that right away. I very vastly overestimated how much time I would have, but that's how it goes. So the business fell flat, and that's okay. So I was just working. Anyway, I'm at the bar. I was a bartender at the time. I just finished my shift. We had a free drink after work, and I'm sitting there drinking my drink, reading a book at the bar. It's slow. And I had to reread this paragraph like 4 times. You know, when you get that when you're like too tired and you just keep rereading the same thing, but you can't commit it to memory. I was doing that, but it wasn't because I was tired. I was distracted. I kept thinking, I would rather be writing right now. I want to be writing because I hadn't written in a while. And so I packed up my stuff. I went home, and then I plopped myself in front of a computer and I just stared at it for a minute. I'm like, what am I going to write about? I don't know what I'm going to write about. I had tried to write a book about resume writing, and I got like 10 pages in and felt like every word I had said was some sort of plagiarism. Felt like all I was doing was rehashing things that I found online or through my own experiences, but that someone else had already said as well. So that didn't get very far. I had gotten a prompt a couple weeks earlier from one of my friends. He invited me to a D&D campaign that I didn't have time for. And, with the invitation was saying, if you want to do this, find out what character you want to be and then write a backstory and submit it to me and we'll go from there. So I took that prompt and I just wrote a backstory for a D&D character. And that night, I think I wrote, I believe I wrote like 11 pages of backstory for this character. And this was a character I hadn't thought about. I knew I wasn't going to be part of this campaign. I didn't commit anything to it. I was just like, oh, nope, I'm not going to do it. And then that was it. I didn't have an idea if I was going to be an elf ranger or if I was going to be, a human warrior or anything. I had no idea. And I wrote these random 11 pages about a character I thought up on the spot. And I really enjoyed it. And I submitted it to my guy, even though I wasn't part of the campaign, and said, hey, here's the story I came up with. I'm not going to be able to participate, but hey, here's what I wrote if you are interested. And he kind of pulled out his hair at it because most people will write a page or two. And, he got 11 pages from me and was like, oh my God, I don't have time for this. So he gave me a little bit of crap for that, but he read it and he liked it. And while he was reading it and going through it over the next week or whatever, I kept writing. I went home every night and I was super thrilled about all this writing I was doing. And on this character that I had put no thought into at all, by the end of the week, I had like almost 70 pages. It was like 67 pages of just a story about this character. And a lot of it was mismatched. I've since kind of parsed it down and used it for a character backstory and someone else who I haven't introduced yet. But overall, I found out, wow, I have a lot to say on this subject. And it didn't feel like I was plagiarizing anything. I didn't feel like I was stealing someone else's ideas or words that they had said before. And I enjoyed it. So I was like, no, maybe I should be writing stuff like this. So I had all these documents from when I was in like middle school on. I thought I wanted to be an artist. So every time I drew a little sketch on the corner of a napkin or a piece of homework or anything, I would take a picture of it on my phone and email it to myself, or I would save it in a Word document or anything. And I just had this massive file of images, character designs, character creations, worlds that I dreamed of that I never did anything with. And I took all of that and I didn't know how to sort through it to begin with because most of it was nonsensical. It was like character design A. Like, what does that even mean? I didn't want to click through every single document and try and piece them together. So I just opened up all of them and I copied them all into one huge document. And I had well over 100 pages of just stuff, all different fonts, all different, it just bad formatting, the whole deal. And I just started parsing through it. And I spent the better part of 3 months when I had time just slowly going through all of it and stuff that, no, I don't like this idea, or I don't even know what to do with this, or I don't even understand what I was trying to get at. I would just copy it into another document where I still have it and it's however long. And then everything that had potential for being part of the story, I would kind of categorize it. The first page, I just put very general categories, world building, character ideas, and like powers. That was it. And then if it fit into one of the three categories, I'd copy paste it into that category and move on. And I did that until all three of those categories were full. And then I just continued parsing it down and parsing it down, doing it over and over and over again until I had something that made sense. And after about 3 months, I had a story. I had about 33 pages of world building and a separate document with about Ooh, 16 pages of character ideas, just general characters that each had like three subtypes underneath them. Like, what is their power? What is their basic storyline? And what are some quotes? Because I had a lot of random quotes in there, and all this stuff. And for whatever reason, some of them would click. That's something that this guy would say. So I would just paste that quote underneath him, and I'll get to it whenever I get to it. And so that's basically what I had. And I was like, wow, I have a story here. So I started writing, and I got approximately 10 chapters in and hit a wall. And that's when I started reaching out for help. Like, how do I actually write a book? I'm just like out here in the dark, feeling around. Like, what do I do now? So then I reached out for help, and yeah, that's kind of where it took me.
Oh, cool. So, your book is obviously has some basis in Eastern religion, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
reincarnation. So, what are the other mythological or inspirations that you used in your world building?
So a lot, and that's part of the reason why it took me so long to go through all of that. Because of course, there's these blanks you have to fill in on the world building, and basically, in my case, universe building. Um, and I was raised as a Christian. Right now, I identify more as agnostic, but I've always had this deep interest in other religions. I think a lot of religions are kind of based in these same belief systems, just maybe interpreted in different ways. It's basically what I've come up with in my own findings, my own beliefs. And I wanted to represent a lot of the larger religions faithfully. So in my arena, my heaven, it actually revolves around 12 deities. They're called the pillars. So if you were to, I think of it like a cube. If you were to take a cube, a 3D cube, and you counted every line that was in that cube, it'd be 12 lines. You've got four for the front square, four for the back square, and then four more that would connect the two to make it a three-dimensional object. That gives you 12. And each line I said was a pillar. They're the pillars of the universe. There's 12 lines, 12 pillars that make up the universe. And each one of them I associated with something that the universe was basically made up of. That was sort of inspired by like the Infinity Stones in Marvel, which a lot of people are familiar with. So I took 12 of them instead of like the six they had. And then I basically built a deity around each of them, and each deity is based out of a different religion. Now, you don't necessarily have to be part of that religion to fall into that one or anything like that. That's just kind of where I got the inspiration for like those 12 gods. And they're basically the gods who make up the universe. And they're sort of non-existent. They're more of a force than they are an actual being, at least at this point. Now, towards the end of my series, we're going to introduce a few of them that are still around in more of a physical manifestation. But at this point, we haven't done that yet. Each of them, though, does have a sort of avatar. They have like a champion, basically. And Lathan is one of them. He is the champion. I call him the prophet of the second pillar. And so he kind of embodies a lot of the abilities and powers that my second pillar would have. And so that's kind of where that starts from. And then each of the powers and beliefs of those pillars do fall under that religion. But the characters that are associated with them don't necessarily do that. Some of them fall under different religions, some of them fall under no belief at all. It's more about living according to that individual's purpose. Like I said, their soul's purpose. Each soul is basically born from these pillars. And so coming to understand that and understanding this is what I was meant to do, because a lot of people always wonder, like, what was I meant to do? You're on Reddit or Tumblr or Facebook or anything like that. You hear people always asking, like, I wish I just knew what I was supposed to do, so I didn't have to waste all this time trying to figure it out. Well, that's part of the journey, and that's why I wanted this cycle of reincarnation, because it's not even just like days, years, decades of trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. It's lifetimes of trying to figure out what your soul was meant for, and that was why you sort of climb this ladder to end up where you end up.
Okay, so what was the hardest type of scene for you to write in the book?
At first, just the boring ones, the plot building scenes, because before I got direction on how long a chapter should be, of course, you can do whatever you want, but there is sort of some status quos you should fall into. And you're basically being kind to your reader. Here's a scene I'm going to give you, and it's going to progress and it's going to end, or it'll need to continue, whatever else. But it's going to get to a point where there's a good stopping point, and that's this chapter. Because if you need to set your book down or move on with life, this is a good breaking point for you. You want them to be not necessarily short, but definitely not too long. So that way, I know when I've read books in the past, you get like 30-page chapters, and I'm like, holy crap, I want to set this down. I have something to do, but where do I put it down at? So that kind of helped me in that regard to, know where to stop it at. And this is going to sound dumb, but I completely lost track of the question after explaining that. Can you repeat that question again?
What was the hardest type of scene for you to write? And you
Oh,
said
that's right, right. Yeah, and I was saying basically, like I said, the boring ones, I guess you could say. I wrote almost every single one of my action scenes right away. When I realized after a little bit of coaching that I didn't have to write my book chronologically, I don't know why I didn't even consider that, but I started with chapter 1 and I was just chapter 2, chapter 3, and I got to 10 and I was like, I don't know where to go from here, and I don't want to write this scene and writer's block or whatever else. And then, the guy who mentored me, Dakota, he goes, just write what you want to write. And he says, and after you've done that, you're going to have days where you want to write a fight scene. You're going to have days where you want to write a plot scene. He says, just write on those days and just connect it all. Your first draft, that's basically what it is. You just write it all, and then you piece it all together. And once you've got a semblance of a structure, then you go back through and you clean it all up and make sure it all fits and is consistent. So that's what I did. But I inadvertently shot myself in the foot in doing that because I wrote all my fight scenes right away, and I love writing those. So I had, at this point, like 20 some odd chapters, and then I had like another 13 chapters to write, and they were all just like chapters where you're talking and figuring things out, and you're moving on to the next scene. And I was dragging my feet on it. It probably took me a year from beginning to end to write the first book and publish it. 6 months of that was probably spent on writing those 10 to 13 chapters, just forcing myself to write them. And now that I have a better idea of what I'm doing, I don't struggle with those chapters as much because I enjoy writing them. I don't even break up my chapters into more readable sections anymore now. I do that later. I just write. I've just gotten into the habit now where I just write until I don't want to write anymore. And maybe sometimes it'll cover 3 or 4 chapters in one go, and I can break it up later. So that has helped me immensely because I don't get stuck on say these boring spots anymore. And then of course editing. I never claimed to be a good writer. I like writing. I am a storyteller and I have a lot of creative ideas, but I have struggles when it comes to editing. So sadly, I have to pay people a good amount of money to do a lot of that for me. But it is what it is. I'm enjoying what I do, so it's just the price you pay, I suppose.
yeah. Well, the editing will improve as you more you write. So
Yeah, well, hopefully, right? And it has. My editor told me that she can already tell a lot of my stuff is coming
oh
along.
yeah. No, it improves. You start seeing things as you're writing and you're self editing. The more you write and the more you get it professionally edited, you start seeing these things just for yourself as you go. So there is that to look forward to.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that.
Okay, so what was your favorite scene in the book to write?
uh, um, at the beginning, my favorite scene was when Lathan arrives on Limbo. That was really interesting to me to finally start writing about a different world, something not Earth. So I loved that scene. There's a lot of symbolism in that scene, and I'm able to start connecting some of the dots as far as like powers too. And that scene was just a lot of fun for me. And it's not an action scene, so it's kind of interesting that that's one of my favorite ones because that's basically all I want to write is fight scenes. Beyond that, my favorite fight scene is between Lathan and this other character named Jester. They basically butt heads from the very beginning. They're somewhat friendly towards each other, but they're also not very kind. They're kind of those asshole guy friends, basically. And they trained together and they ended up getting into it, and they decided to take one of their training matches kind of to the next level. And they legitimately go at it, like they're not holding back at all. And it's sort of the scene where Lathan is able to wake up his power and realize like I am capable of a lot more than what I thought I was. and I'm not going to pull any punches this time. I am going to figure out just how far I can go. So that seems a lot of fun for me because, of course, he's not reaching his maximum potential yet, but he finally taps into the fact that this is not all I have and I can push for more. And yeah, it's going to hurt, but I can do it. And so that was a lot of fun for me too because it was a big scene where my character develops, and also I got to write an awesome action scene.
Okay, so are any of your secondary characters quirky or steal scenes?
Yes, definitely. Jester steals a scene near the end of the book. I have these things called sovereign keys in my book, and they're basically just like legendary weapons that have a soul attached to them because everything in Arenia revolves around souls. Literally, the bedrock of the world of this heaven is the souls. They're basically calcified souls that have built the bedrock of this world. And so a lot of souls, they sort of get tired with immortality and they want to change what they're doing. They're on Renia and they live there now, and this is it. They either get tired of what's happening in the world, they get tired of trying or not trying or whatever, and some of them just kind of go dormant, or some of them decide to be something else. And some of the powerful ones that have decided to be something else have basically made themselves into weapons and they become tools for others. They only work with people who are like-minded like them. So like Lathan, he has one, and his weapon is called Justice. And Justice will only work with like a select few individuals who have the same like-mindedness. But if they do and they're able to wield him, they wield incredible power through him, right? So Jester also gets one of these sovereign keys, one of these legendary weapons, and his is not so nice. It is not based on justice at all. In fact, it's based on like what's the easiest way to describe this? It's really based in magnetism, but it's pulling all things together is really what it is. It's not just magnetizing metals or different minerals. It's literally the bonds between everything that pull them together or push them apart. That's kind of what his pillar is. And through this, I had the idea of doing a cult, and the idea of doing a key that, even though it's a weapon, it's a dangerous one to wield for those who can wield it because it basically eats you alive. It wants your soul to be added to its collective. And so wielding it gives him enormous power, but it also is a huge danger because if you cannot fend off the mental willpower needed to fend off that soul's personality, it will literally eat you alive. It will absorb you into the weapon itself, and that's it. You're gone. You're just another piece added to its collection. And so he wakes that weapon up near the end of the first book, and it immediately has an impact on him, and it makes an immediate change on his personality and his fighting prowess. And it goes from a scene where Lathan is trying to defend him as he's sort of communing with this weapon to Jester saying, "Step back, Lathan, I got this," and then killing everyone in the room. And that's a very tough accomplishment in a world where people are immortal, to kill someone. If you ever watch the movies like Blade, when he kills the vampires and they turn to like embers and dust, that's the same idea. But to do it, you'd have to shatter. They have each of them have like some sort of crystal that's like embedded around their body, and that's kind of like their calcified soul that is part of them. You'd have to shatter that, which is an incredibly hard substance. It is basically the hardest substance known in the universe. There's nothing stronger than it. So to be able to destroy one is incredibly difficult. And when you do it, basically it just breaks them down into dust and they just settle and become part of the world at that point. They're not really an autonomous life form anymore. And he does that to the entire room with his weapon. And Lathan's jaw basically drops. He's like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that just happened. What is going on with him?" But then events keep going faster and faster, so he doesn't really have time to sit and ponder at it. So it's kind of left with a big question mark at the end of the first book, and it's Jester becomes a main character in my second book, where we really explore what he's now going through being connected with this legendary weapon.
That's a good setup for the next book.
Yep, I thought so.
Anyway, so well, you're obviously writing fantasy, but as things are going to progress for you, are there any other genres that you would like to dabble in or try?
Absolutely. I'm already dabbling in a little bit of horror. I have one of my spin-off stories I'm working on that is connected to Arenia. You know, the beautiful part about writing the story I'm writing is like I said, it's heaven, right? I can write any world I want and connect it to this same universe. And one of my characters can die at the end of this book, this story, this trilogy, whatever, and then they can reappear again on Arenia, and I can re-explore or continue to explore this character in the afterlife. So that's one of the things I'm really excited to do. And in this other side story I'm working on, that's basically exactly what I'm going to do. I'm doing a bit more of a horror slash fantasy write on it. It's mostly just ideas at this point. I've got a couple chapters that I was inspired to write, but nothing cohesive yet. I've got like one chapter on each of my main characters, and then like another random one where this scene I just couldn't get out of my head one night, so I just put it down on paper. But that's basically it. It's very minimal at this time. My focus is definitely far more on my sequels to the first book than it is on that story. But exploring the horror side has been really fun for me. I'm introducing like legitimate monsters coming out of the darkness and stuff like that, and the battle between like sort of a good and light fantasy aspect. So that's been a lot of fun, and it's been really inspiring for me to listen to different storytelling. I've been so encapsulated and completely taken over by fantasy for so long, and I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love fantasy stuff, but I've been taken over by it for so long that I almost forgot that there's other genres out there. And so it started with me just randomly listening to a random horror podcast that one of my friends on Facebook shared, and I fell in love with it. Like the first episode, I was like, wow, that was great. So I binged through the entire podcast, and it completely inspired me to put a new twist on this side story I was doing and make it a little bit more horror driven. And it's been a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, horror is a lot of fun to write.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Sure. Well, I'm self-published through Amazon, so you can find my book on Amazon. When you look for The Last Soul on Amazon, just in the search bar, I'm like the first or the second book you see every time. I think the only one that is ever above me is a random ad that has one of either The Last or The Soul in its title. So I don't have mine on set up like that. So when you search it, it's always in the top two for what you've looked for. You can find me mostly on Facebook. I'm an old fogey when it comes to that. Apparently, Facebook is out of date and everyone uses all these different social medias, but Facebook is what I use and that's what I like. So I've got my author page on there. It's just the Arenia Codex. I've also got a group in there. I call it a mind dump, where it's literally just me just throwing images out there or just a random idea I had or something that inspired me. Those are the best places to find me. And of course, you've got my website too, theareniacodex.com. You can always contact me on there. I put blog posts on there, and it's just general overview of my book if you're interested. There's also a link on there too for anyone who doesn't know if they'll like it, they want to test run it. There's a link where you can download the first 7 chapters of my book for free and see if it's a right fit for you. If you like it, great, go buy it. If you don't, you gave it a shot. So that's also on there as well. So, but the main answer is Facebook. Either the Arenia Codex on Facebook for a page search, and you'll find my cover of the book as the cover image there, or my group called A Mind Dump for J.M. Lively.
Okay, so thank you for being here today. It's lovely chatting with you.
You too. Thank you.
And between the pages, we'll be back next weekend with more authors. So join us then. And that's all for now. So bye.